everybody. Thank you for joining us for the webinar where we're going to explain how you can pay your locum pension contributions with gov.uk Pay. My name is Debbie Roberts and I work in the communications team at PCSE, and I'll be helping support tonight's webinar. Okay, so the agenda for this evening, I'll start off with just letting you know who we've got supporting on the call this evening, and then I will hand you over to Katrina, who's going to run through a system demonstration and show you how to use the new gov.uk Pay to submit your locum payments. We'll then be having a look at failed payments and then locum overpayments, and we'll end on questions, but we will be stopping for questions in between as well. Okay, so just to let you know who we do have on the call this evening. So we have Katrina, who is the PCSE Senior Stakeholder Relationship Manager. We have Janet Knox from NHS England, who's the Performance and Assurance Senior Manager. We have Sarah Gardner from NHS Pensions. She's the Technical Consultant. And I've already introduced myself, and I work in the PCSE Communications team. Okay, so to make a start, I'm going to hand you over to Katrina, who's going to run through the gov.uk Pay.
Thanks, Debbie. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. What we're looking to do here is do a live demonstration from our test environment. The objective of tonight is to give you early view of the functionality that you'll be able to use from next week to make your locum pension payments when you use PCSE Online to submit your locum A and B forms. There'll be no more having to go to your online banking and enter NHS England's bank account details and all the different references and the payment amount, etc., and then wait for that payment to make its way through and be picked up by PCSE to allocate to your forms that you've submitted online. The whole journey will be instant and you will see that your record will be updated. So we're very excited to launch this. We've had it in the pipeline for quite some time. It forms part of a major overhaul of the finance platform that manages all of the payments in and out of the NHS England bank account to all sorts of suppliers and vendors and invoice systems, and PCSE and locum GPs being just one small cog in that wheel. So it's been a huge project that various organisations have collaborated on together, and like I say, we're absolutely delighted that we're now about to go live. So let me just see if we can get into this test environment and start sharing screen. So we have logged in here as a test GP, as Debbie says, and different users on PCSE Online have different functionality, but our test GP works as a salaried GP and does some locum work. So we have already submitted a locum A form or a series of locum A forms through the system and had them approved by the practice or practices that our GP works at, because the objective tonight is to show you the change in the locum B functionality. So if we click on the locum work tile, then you can see we've got various options, and we'll touch on some of the others later on, but we're going to go to locum form B income entry, and that will open a locum B form. So we're going to select the financial month from the drop down. So we're going to select September. And this particular GP locums for practices. They're not an appraiser, so we select the non-RMS option, and assuming that most of our audience this evening are locum GPs, they'll be very familiar with this form if you indeed already use PCSE Online to submit your A and B forms. So we can see listed the 3 locum A forms that our locum GP has completed. And like I say, we can see that the status is they've already been approved now by the practice, and we get the dates shown just for interest really as to when the 10-week period of the 10-week rule will make these forms expire, but we're well within that. So we're going to create a form B, and for the purposes of the demonstration then I'm going to include all of my A forms. That would be the normal behaviour for most GPs. So you can see in the pensionable pay and employer contribution fields, that the amounts then increase cumulatively, adding all of our forms together. So that's just the same functionality that already exists. So then we scroll down the form, and again, as normal, we need to select the tier rates for our pensionable pay. So for this GP, then they believe that they should be 12.5%. So we're going to select that, and that automatically calculates what is our employee contributions. And then we have the employer's pension contributions and our total contributions payable. Now, if a GP has added years, ERBO, etc., then as these fields populate, then our total contributions payable amount will obviously add all of the contributions together. And up until now, that's when you would, once you've submitted this form, you would then make a note of that and go to your online banking and start to go through the motions to make the payments. But what you'll see now, so just to recap, the same functionality still exists. If you need to save for later, come back to forms and even cancel forms, that's all still there. But when we click submit, then you get your confirmation pop up as usual, and then we shall now see a different pop up. So what you can see here now, just to pause on this, really, this is telling us that the Locum Form B has been successfully submitted, and it's telling us to scroll down to this Pay Securely with gov.uk Pay button and to make the payment for our pension contributions. So if I click OK to that, then all I need to do is scroll down my form. I can see all of the values that we saw earlier. Oops, sorry. Helped if I held the mouse down, and you can see now that you have this pink button, nice and bright for us to see, and that it says Pay Securely with gov.uk Pay, which is the way that the description for the secure gov.pay site appears on all of the government websites and the associated materials that that describe what functionality is available through that payment platform. So gov.uk Pay is a secure payment platform that's used by many organisations to make safe transactions, and a lot of the government bodies and other associated organisations will use this mechanism to collect payments for various different reasons and processes. So this is the platform that's been introduced, and like I said earlier, that's in collaboration with NHS England and NHS SBS, who operate the NHS England banking platform, and all of the other parties that have been involved in the project. So what we're going to do now is just click this button, and you'll see here that this pops up and tells me it's a test page. So when you see this in the live system and you start completing B forms from next week onwards, then you won't get this test page, but it will have the banner across the top that says it's NHS England PCSE collaboration, and what you will be taken to is enter card details. Now you'll see that it gives us the payment summary. So the first thing to point out is it pulls the total amount of contributions through from our B form and auto-populates that amount. So we then don't have any sort of risk of typing in digits round the wrong way, etc. when we go to the online banking software, as you carry that risk at the moment. I know everybody's very careful, but it does happen where GPs end up having paid, something that's a small error compared to what it should be, or it might be, £913 instead of 31, etc. And then that involves the PCSE team having to come to you and sort all of that out. It might be a partial refund. It might be you've got a shortfall and you have to make another payment. All of that sort of risk and pain goes away now. You've got an auto-populated amount here, and functionality that you'll be very familiar with through making payments for other things really in your day-to-day life. You have the option to enter a Visa or credit card, a debit or a credit card, and we'll pop some test details in to show you how that works in a second. But you might wonder what this reference is that comes under the payment summary. So first of all, I should point out that this kind of long-winded GPP, GP salaried Bryony dash Canon, that's the name of our test GP. The test team like to give things really complex names to identify them. So that would be the name. Locum B contributions for September 25. That's the Locum B form that we've just completed. And these two codes at the beginning of this reference, these are for NHS England's purposes when the payment flows through into their system or into their bank account system. That allows the payment to be allocated so the pension contributions can be paid over to NHS pensions, but they're not particularly of interest to yourselves as GPs. We'll come on to the reference that matters to you in a moment. So I'm now going to pop the card details in, and this is a test card, so hopefully I'll type these in correctly at first attempt. Otherwise you'll see that it stops you in your tracks, as all card systems do if you get it wrong. So I've got an expiry date of 12/25. My test card is in this name. And I have the last three digits as 101. So the next thing that this gov.uk pay functionality requires us to do, platform requires us to do, is to type in our address. So again, we've got the test address here. So I'm going to need to put in the town or city. And finally, I think it's the final thing. Yep, the postcode. So again, we've got this data from our test card. It populates with the email address that's pulled through from the PCSE system for our GP. And then you can see we've got two options here at the bottom. So we've got an option to continue, which I'm going to do in a second. And we've also got an option to cancel the payment. So if I don't know, suddenly decide that I want to pay with a different card or come back to it later because I've suddenly thought maybe, you know, I've got something to query on what I've already entered, then I can click cancel at this point. But I'm going to click continue, and what will happen now, again, in the live environment, you will not get the message telling you it's the test page, but what you will get, again, fairly sort of similar to other payment platforms really, confirm your payment. So it's going to give us the card number with the last 4 digits. It's only going to have accepted that card if it's in the right format, etc. If I put in, I don't know, 13 digits instead of 16, then, you know, I'll get a message straight away telling me I can't go any further. So it's accepted all of the card details, they're in the right format, and I'm going to confirm the payment. Okay, so this is an important bit for me. So this is where it tells me the status of the transaction. It's been a success, so I'm happy about that. And it also gives me this important payment ID. Now the payment ID is what you will see on your bank statement against the amount that has just been paid by the card that you've used to pay it. So the card statement or the bank statement, depending on what type of card you've used, and that tells us, as I said, that the payment's been a success, the transaction's been a success. So you have that reference, and you can go straight back to the Locum Form B. So I'm just going to do that. Suggest it's good practice to go back to the form just when you're getting used to the functionality. And if we scroll right down our form now, you can see all of the data still there, but we've got this transaction history now. So this is new. We won't have had this in the Form B before. You've got the transaction history telling me the date and the time that I've made the payment, the amount of the payments, and that the payment's successful, and I don't need to do anything else. So we'll come on to some scenarios in a little while where payments have failed, etc. But if you've used a valid card and you've clicked submit to and confirmed your payment, then that is how it will appear when that payment has been successful. And it really is as simple as that. You do not need to do anything else, and you really have, you've completed everything you need to do. The bit that I mentioned earlier on, where up until now, when you've made a payment through your online banking, you then have to wait. PCSE would get a weekly notification of transactions from NHS England. There's then a kind of queuing process to then review forms that have been received against transactions, and the payment has to be allocated to your forms before you see update on your employee contribution statement. But if we look at our GP here, then as long as the test system is behaving itself, if we go to click on employee contribution statement, so we've just gone back to the main GP pensions menu. So this is our employee contribution statement screen. Hopefully you'll all be familiar with this, but what you would do is select the financial year that we're in, so 25-26. I'm looking for locum earnings. I've mentioned at the beginning, I think, that this particular test GP also has a salary role in a practice, and those are the only filters that I really need to put on if I want to look at the locum income. So click search, and what we can see here is that we've got September 25 locum earnings. So this is the first locum month that this GP's had. Monthly income, or the locum earnings, the employer's contribution amount, employee contribution amount, and if we just scroll to the right, the total amount. So as the months go on, then you'll have made your payments each month, and you'll be able to see that your totals for each month will be visible on your employee contribution statement as normal, but that will be instant. So the moment you've made the payment, really, you'll be able to click through to the employee contribution statement and see that that's now showing on your PCSE online account. So you've really got the sort of reassurance that that's all been done, and there's nothing else for you to do. And like I say, it really is as straightforward as that. So before I pause for any questions, then I'm just going to show you a few screenshots from where we may, for one reason or another, end up with a failed payment scenario, and just sort of bring to life for you how what that will look like on the screen, and then what you need to do next. So failed payments then. So if you think about what I've just shown on screen, we had a confirmation that said our payment was successful, and then a link to return back to the Form B. So if for any particular reason a payment has failed, due to any sort of background issue with the gov.pay system or anything like that, then you will, instead of having a message that says your payment's successful, here's the reference for it, you will see quite clearly your payment has failed. And you will then be able to click to return to the Form B. Now, the bottom half of this screen is now showing you, if you can imagine when we were back in the Form B, then this is showing you that bottom section of the Form B. Now, transaction history. So instead of saying payment status successful, which is what we saw in our demonstration, then this is showing you an example where the payment status has failed. And the further steps, what it describes there is the payment has failed, please make a new payment using the button again. So we can click that button again. It will take us to exactly the screens that we've just been through, where we're presented with, this is your payment amount, please enter your card details, and we work down that again. So that's it's a simple kind of loop back round, present the button to you again, and you can try the payment again. So that's really the only steps you need to take then if you get this message, and assuming your payment is then successful next time, then you again have nothing more to do. You're back to that fully updated record again. And if we can move on to the next one, we saw when we were submitting our payment on the live demo that we did have the option to click cancel payment. So had I clicked cancel payment at that point instead of continue and submit, then this would have been the pop-up message. So it's just telling me, yep, your payment's been cancelled. Nothing's, this hasn't gone through. No money's been taken from your account. And if you then click continue, then you then really go back to that failed payment message. The payment hasn't gone through, so your payment's failed. And if you click the return to Locum B form or Locum form B link again, take us back to the B form. And when we scroll down to the bottom of the B form now, then if that was a real kind of journey that I tested out earlier on this evening, so we had one failed payment. I then went back to the Pay Securely button and went through to that, but then when I'd entered the details, decided to click cancel payment. So I've cancelled payment and I've come back again and to the B form, and it said, right, okay, you've had another failed payment because you haven't gone through with that, and so you still need to go to the Pay Securely button and make the payment, and it takes you back around that loop again. So, quite clear, straightforward to do, even if you go away and, so you might decide to do a bit of admin on a short lunch break or something and not quite get it done. If you get anything where, something fails because it times out or anything like that, you will always be able to look back round to your B form and back to the Pay Securely button. So really, cutting down the time, and really important that it gives you that quality assurance check that you've made the payment for the right amount and that it's being instantly allocated to your record. So I'm going to pause there. That's obviously quite a lot of information that we've run through there. Hopefully it sounds straightforward, but I'm sure we might have some questions, Debbie. So should we pause and see if we've got any questions? So the first question, I think, says what to do if the employee contribution is not updated. So that, I understand the question, but the solution is fully integrated. So if you get a message that says your payment is successful, then your employee contribution statement will be updated. So the only time it wouldn't be updated would be if you had a pop-up message saying that your payment had not been successful, and you would have that in the transaction history in the B form. Can the payment be made with Amex? So the payment card types, I believe, that are supported by GovPay are any type of Visa and MasterCard, including Visa debit, obviously. So I don't believe that Amex is supported in that. I do locum and appraisal work. Please can you show me how to enter these? So Rachel, I think your question might be in relation to the A form. Yeah, I think you said, can you show how I would add both of these? So you would have your B form for your practice work and your B form for your appraisal work, because you've got an option to select if it is RMS and an option to select which is the sort of appraisal system, and an option to select if it's not, which is all the practice stuff. So you'd have your two separate B forms. So it's just a case of selecting the RMS option, pulling through your appraisal A forms into B, popping that across, or submitting that, and then doing any practice work on that. Joe, you may be asking the same question. So if you're also talking about appraiser income and locum income. So if your appraisal work is as a locum GP, then you would, just as I've just sort of gone through there, you would have your A forms for your appraisal work, and you'd have your A forms for your practice locum work, and then you would have the option to select RMS, and that will pull the appraisal A forms. You have a B form there, and then you'd have your non-RMS, which will pull your practice A forms into B form, select them, and then that will give you the total to pay for them. If you have, so some GP appraisers do their work as locums, and some GP appraisers who also have, if you also have salaried roles or a partner somewhere, your appraisal work would be under the solo route. So that doesn't come through the A and B forms at all, and you do that through, you declare that through your end of year type 2 or type 1 form. But I presume you're possibly a locum only GP, and you're talking about being locuming for practices and also locuming as an appraiser, so therefore you'd have that two separate forms really on there. Good question, this one. Do all managers know of this system now? So they should. We have, sort of communicated to all the practices multiple times about, the importance of having someone in place who has or not just one person, but backup as well, who have the role on PCSE Online at a practice level that can approve locum A forms, and we have, help videos and everything to show them how to do it. I think it's 3 clicks actually. I think they have to go to the locum tile, locum approval tile, might be 4 clicks, select the form and click submit. So it's really super easy for them to check and do. But we will, because we'll be communicating out to the wider world to be kind of showcasing this new improved and enhanced functionality, and we will be bringing it to the attention of practices as well as the locums themselves, and we'll be asking practices to check that they've got active users with the approval role, so that if you are locuming at a practice, then they absolutely should have someone who can approve your forms, and it's really quick for them to do. So it's really much better for the practices than having to deal with paper and email things backwards and forwards, etc. Someone's asking about whether the paper system will continue. So it is still an option at the moment. So the paper forms, where you have to go to the practice with the form, get them to approve your A form, and then complete a B form for all your A forms. You've downloaded those forms from the NHS Pensions website to begin with, etc. And then you submit all of that through the Contact Us form. It really does take a lot longer to go through all of those steps. So, your online system, you have some really kind of quick and easy steps to follow. We've got Mark Coley's asked a good question. Mark is a member of the BMA sessional committee, and he has recorded some videos for us previously showing how, as a GP, demonstrating how to use PCSE Online for the locum A and B forms. It's going to be really happy. We're going to ask him to do another B form video soon, because we've got this new bit to add on the end. But if we think about the A form and comparing that to completing a form manually, then if you watch Mark's video, and we'll send around all the links and things, you'll see how easy that is to do. But the question Mark's raised is, will there be an email from gov.uk pay? And yes, that email address is pulled across and entered, so there is a confirmation that goes out. Yeah, so good question about I noticed that at the end that I had typo in the address when I was going through the demonstration, so RAOD instead of road, and it didn't pick it up in the test environment, did it? And the question is, would it be picked up in live? So what the live system validates is that it's a valid postcode, so a little bit like some of the, the other credit card kind of functionalities and debit cards when you go and pay for things in retail outlets and so on. They validate on postcodes, not on the street detail bits of the street spelling, is our understanding from gov.pay. Thanks for the question. Can you submit several times a month? Some surgeries take longer to pay than others. Yes, you can. And the fact that you can kind of go straight in and you're making your payment seamlessly for the A forms that you have selected into the B form that you're producing or entering should hopefully make that easier for you. You would then have, B form number 1 for, say, September, and then maybe, before we get to the end of the month, I might have completed another form, and I might want to pull in another 2 A forms or something like that, and that's just another payment. And what you'll see on your employee contribution statement, the only thing to highlight about that is that, let's just say you have had 2 B forms for the 1 month. Say it's the month of September. When you submit your first one, you'll see a clean line of locum. If you filter on locum, it'll be September, pensionable pay, ease, heirs, total, etc. When you come to and you've submitted your second B form for a month, you'll see that kind of adds to the September line. So you'll have the total of, so if you submitted 2 B forms in the month, then the total for that month on your employee contribution statement will be the total of your 2 B forms. If you have submitted 3B forms because you decide, that's just how things have gone that month, then once you've submitted all 3, the total on your employee contribution statement line will be the total of the contributions for all 3. So just to point that out, really. One of the organisations is still not registered with PCSE Online to approve forms. That's really disappointing to hear. So they will be registered with PCSE Online. All practices are. However, they may not have an active user at the surgery or the organisation that runs a practice who has that role to approve forms. But like I say, we will be promoting that to all the practices again, and we'll be looking to identify, because we get data requests from the back end of our system to show any practices without active users of a particular user role. So we will be targeting very politely any practices that don't have, and really saying, this is NHS England. All the government, the various bodies have made a lot of investment of time, energy, and money to get this to be an improved solution for locum GPs, and also to remove some of the burden of administration from the practices and the appraisal teams as well in the regions in the approval process, etc. So to not have somebody at a practice who can actually make the approvals isn't particularly acceptable, is it? So we'll be trying to do all of that. How about the addition of locum A and B forms via the contact us function? Is this when booked via locum deck? Yes. So as I said earlier, that still exists as an option if you have your A and B forms produced for you and you decide that rather than keying them and so that you can make the immediate payment, that you still want to submit them via contact us, then you can still do that at the moment. But as I say, the demo shows how quick and easy it is around the payments now if you're using the online solution. And there's a question here. I'd probably defer this to, I think I know what the answer is, but I'd probably defer it to our colleague Sarah from NHS Pensions, who's kindly joined us this evening. But this question, Sarah, is: are there plans to change the 10-week rule to a 3-month rule? So by the end of the 3rd month after the work done, this would mean a clear and consistent deadline. I don't believe there are any plans to change it. I think it's in regulations, but I'm probably just going to get Sarah to confirm that for us.
As Katrina rightly says, the 10-week rule has been a feature of the NHS pension scheme regulations since locums were allowed to pension their work way back in 2001, off the top of my head. So as far as I'm aware, there are no plans to change that rule, and that would be a DHSC.
Thanks very much, Sarah. That's great. Yeah. So as Sarah says, it would be Department of Health and Social Care that would have to change the regulations if the 10 weeks was to become something different. What about if forms are sent via PCSE inquiry? So I think you mean the contact us form on the PCSE website, Anwar. So there is no active email address to send locum forms to. So the only routes would be using PCSE Online as we've demonstrated, or the contact us form as we've confirmed that is still a valid route for sending your forms. Please can you show appraisal for appraisal 2 for Rachel. Just to recap, if you can visualise it on the B form that I showed you, where we selected non-RMS at the, kind of near the top of the form, then you would have an option for RMS, and then your appraisal locum session, or if it's multiple A's, then would appear on the screen. But we'll record a user journey and make sure we include that as soon as possible, so that it's very clear for people who are appraisers and work in practice, just so that you've got, the nuances of that. I think we've come to the end of the questions. There's one other new screen that I wanted just to bring to people's attention and just explain what it's for. So the screen that you'll see in front of you, these are the options that you will see when you click the locum button when you're in the GP pensions area of PCSE Online. So we saw this earlier on in the live demo. We went straight into the B form. So just to recap what all of the buttons what all of the buttons are. So the A form entry speaks for itself. This is what you're going to complete every time you have an A form to submit, and then clearly that gets approved by either the practice, if it's a practice session, or if it is appraisal work, it'll be approved by the regional team. And then we talked a lot about the B forms. We've also got locum listing. You'll see that in some of the other videos. And locum listing button allows you to see a list of all of the locum forms that you have submitted previously, and you can filter that on Locum A, or you can select Locum B, so you can see your forms if you need to for any reason. But the Locum Bank Details button is a new button, and the reason that that's there is that when it comes to end of year reconciliation, then it sometimes transpires that a GP who has, so maybe they're submitting a type 2 form because they do, they're a salary GP in a practice as an example, and they also do some locum work. When that type 2 form is reconciled, if it transpires that the GP has been paying their locum sessions, their locum contributions at a higher tier rate than the annual reconciliation shows that they should have been on, then it effectively means they've overpaid their locum contributions. And if we think about the journey, the GP has paid those locum contributions directly themselves, their employee contributions, they've made that payment now through gov.pay hopefully, but they've made the payment. So when it comes to the reconciliation showing that they've overpaid, then the overpayment needs to be refunded back to the GP. And if any of you have been in this scenario before, up until now, then up until very recently, you will have received a cheque actually from NHS England. There's a bit of a process that goes through, starts with PCSE and goes through various departments and layers in NHS England, and a cheque was issued to the GP. The payments, the refunds have changed to backs a little while ago, but this screen's been introduced to provide a secure way of capturing the bank account details, because PCSE would need to capture the bank account details to be able to then pop that through the NHS England system to request a refund for you. Then on the slide here, you can see that it's pretty much the details that you would normally see when you're being asked to complete your bank details anywhere. So name of account holder, name of the bank, sort code, account number, and if it's a building society, the reference number, but a lot of the time that's blank. So the way that this will be used in future is that if you fall into the situation where end of year reconciliation means that you are due a refund for some of the payment that you've made for locum pension contributions, then the PCSE team will contact you, let you know that that's the case, confirm that's the case. You would probably have already worked that out from your annual self-assessment form anyway, but they'll confirm that's the case, and they will ask you to complete the bank details screen within 7 days, and then they will go back and check that. So you just need to enter your details and click save, and that will save them into the PCSE system. The PCSE agent will go and retrieve those details. They will push them through the system into the NHS England payment system to request that refund by backs for you, and that refund will work its way through the system, and you will receive that into your bank account. And then the details are not saved for a long duration. They are erased, scrambled, they're not there permanently in the PCSE system. So after that refund's been processed, and the reason I mention that is twofold, I suppose. One is that has been introduced as part of the functionality as a security measure, so we're not holding bank details for any longer than we need them. And also, just so that you're aware that if the year after your end of year reconciliation shows that again you are due a refund, it might be a small amount, it might be a larger amount, but whatever it is, then you will receive a request from PCSE to complete that screen again, because we haven't held. So you might think, hang on a minute, I supplied that last year. Well, we haven't held those bank details. So that's really for your own reassurance and just information that I mentioned that. So again, when you go onto the screens next week and you click on Locum, that will be one of the buttons. You don't need to go near it, do anything with it, unless PCSE contact you about a refund that you're due. So I hope that makes sense. Are there any other final questions that we have in the
We do have
chat?
some more questions, Katrina. And just one from me. Can we just
Yep.
confirm the start date when people can actually start using govuk.pay?
Thank you, Debbie. That's a really important point. So we were targeting the 1st of October for this to go live. So that will be available once we've confirmed that the system is up and running after this huge deployment that we've got over the...
Lovely. Thank you, Katrina. We have one question asking who's responsible for submitting the Locum A form. Is it the practice or is it the Locum GP that needs to make the entry?
No, so it's the GP themselves. So just to take a step back in the journey, if you haven't used or pensioned your income as a locum before, perhaps, or you just newly started as doing some locum work, if you decide to pension your locum income, then you need to complete the Locum A form. There's guidance, a lot of guidance, obviously, on the NHS Pensions website about the rules around the 10-week period that you have to go through this end-to-end journey to get all of your forms submitted. But there's also information and help videos on the PCSE website. But the locum GP themselves needs to complete the A form. The practice then needs to authorise that or confirm that to say we approve, yes, that definitely happened, that was the right dates and the right amounts of pay, etc. And then when they have approved that, then after any time after that, up until the deadline for the 10-week rule, the locum GP then goes in and creates the Form B. So apologies, I think probably started off with the assumption at the start that everybody would have done locum forms in some way, shape or form before, but if anyone on the call hasn't, then it starts with the A form and then the practice approve the A form and then you can complete and need to complete your B form. Is there a way we can contact you with details of practices who are refusing PCSE online requests? Yeah, I mean, we would be very keen to find out about that. If you have got the details at hand, if you use our Contact Us form, select the Locum option on the Contact Us form and submit a note that way, then we will pick that up and have a look. Thank you for flagging that. Katie, if submitting in B via organiser, is it still possible to use gov.pay? So if you're using the Contact Us form, currently, no, it's not then possible to use the gov.uk pay function. It's only there as part of the PCSE online journey, as you saw. So that if the forms are coming in through Contact Us, then it needs to be the old-fashioned route of going to the online banking and then obviously then waiting for things to be matched up. And if using the Contact Us form, do we still pay into the old NHS England account? So if using the Contact Us form, the process hasn't changed at all, but hopefully this evening has encouraged people to go to the online solution. If the Locum A form will not allow you to add the employer contribution amount for an RMS appraisal claim. So the Locum A form auto-populates with the employer contributions, Catherine. So hopefully whether it's a appraisal locum session or sessions or practice, so hopefully when we produce the video that I mentioned earlier on that shows the journey for locum appraisers, then you'll see how that works and follows through. Then we have a question, if a few locum A forms from a month are missed and a B is already generated and submitted, can the A forms be added to the existing form? Or it generates a B? Yes. So if you have been through the whole journey and submitted the B form and now you have made the payment as well, then if you then have, I think the question came up in a slightly different way earlier. The question earlier was, can you submit more than one B form in a month? And to accommodate for the fact that some practices are quicker at paying and processing things than others, then the system does allow you to submit more than one B form in a month. So, but if you've already submitted the first B form through the system, then when you do those extra A forms, if you like, or when the extra A forms get approved, you will then have a second B form that you will complete. Yeah, and someone else mentioning that some practices still do not entertain the PCSE online A form, and we'd be very interested. The local commissioning, the ICBs would be very interested in that as well. The last one is, again, it's probably asking a similar question in a different way. I've been putting A and B forms via a query. With this, do we no longer need to submit these forms? So just to recap, what you are doing on the system is you are submitting the same form that you would be if you had completed it on paper and uploaded it through Contact Us. So it's a very clear requirement for PCSE Online to mirror the Locum A and B forms that are published by NHS Pensions. So when you log into PCSE Online, select and complete an A form, get it approved, and then you select and complete your B forms, you are completing your A and B forms, but you absolutely don't need to, and please don't, submit duplicate copies through the Contact Us form. That's an awful lot of extra work for you, and you're taking away the benefit that you're going to achieve. And I just want to mention this very last one, that if an employer hasn't approved your form that you've submitted, then if you contact PCSE through the Contact Us form, then we will look at that for you and get that resolved. If it hasn't been, if you've submitted it in good time for the 10-week, to comply with the 10-week rule, and they haven't approved. So thank you very much, everybody. I'll just hand back to you, Debbie.
Lovely. Thank you, Katrina, for running through that demonstration with us. I hope everybody found it useful. I'd just like to thank everybody for joining this evening. We do have lots of other videos available, so if you need some support in submitting Locum A forms or submitting Locum B forms, please do head over to the PCSE YouTube channel and you'll find there's various playlists that will be able to help you on the way. Other than that, I'd just like to wish you all a lovely evening and I hope you enjoy the new functionality.